Hello, everyone.
Yes. Let Julian talk.
Hello. So today I'm going to talk about our awesome the window manager that I guess a lot of you guys already know. I ended up with Lua and not Guile. So as everyone knows, we picked Lua a long time ago. So a lot of the things I'm going to talk about today are a bit old, but I think it's going to give us a bit of insight on both languages. So who here already used Awesome or is using still Awesome? Quite a few people. Cool. Yeah. I'm not using Awesome anymore, as you may have seen. So sorry. So who I am? Well, I'm Julian. I've been doing free software things for a while now. I'm not that old, but I started quite young. So I've been Debian developer for the most of my life now, and nowadays I work for Red Hat, that you all know, I guess, on OpenStack. So I do Python stuff also. So I'm really not into Guile anymore for a few years. So I'm going to tell you how Awesome started at the beginning. It's quite a fun story to hear, I guess. That's my desktop like 10 years ago. So I was using dual screens, and you can see it, but it's FOSDEM, so the old window manager that has been there for like 20 years or so, which I liked, but it was kind of a pain to configure. I think I never really understand how you're supposed to configure it, but I was, copy-pasting configuration files from other people. And one day that happens, because I switched my desktop from a 32-bit system to AMD 64, and well, every WM somewhere was bugged on that, so I had to switch to another window manager. I guess like many of you guys are use like every window manager out there, like you try all the Flexbox, OpenBox, whatever box, window maker, etc. So I mean, it's always like, once a year, like, oh, I'm going to try this one, maybe it's better, and yeah, it's never ending. But at the end, I stumbled upon DWM, which is a very small window manager, essentially tiling, so it organizes your windows for you. And I started to patch it because it has a very low set of features, and I think it's still true today. And you had like to recompile to do anything, so everything, it's just like 2,000 lines of C code, and you have to recompile it if you want to change anything in DWM. That's kind of their philosophy, which I don't really adhere to, but it is like it is. There was a lot of people writing features for it and sending patches to the mailing list, but none of the patches were merged into DWM because, well, policy is not to merge anything. So people had to like always maintain their own patches, which was a pain. So I started to grab all the patches I thought were interesting and build a new window manager, which I call JDWM, renamed to Awesome for version 1. So anyone use version 1 or maybe version 2, which were like long time ago? Few of you? Yeah. It was a long time ago. It only, I think, it existed for like less than a year. So so I started to have users actually because, well, people were kind of happy not to have to maintain their patches anymore. So people started to use a bit of Awesome because it was like DWM but better with more features and with a configuration file, which is very handy when you want to change things, not to have to recompile everything, and it's more easy to port, to maintain. It was packaged in Debian, it was easy to use, more easy than DWM. That's what is on DWM page, so that's one of the reasons, like I said, that why I was getting a lot more users than DWM at the time, because, well, they didn't want to merge anything, and to have like a configuration file was no option for them. So but pretty soon people started to ask a lot of features, and a lot of the features were either incompatible or like way too complicated to write. Like people started to want like title bars, so you write title bars, and then people want to have title bars on Windows that are floating and not tied, but only on this desktop and this desktop. So that's like a lot of options. So pretty soon you'll start thinking about having your own GSL, which is always a bad idea because it's never, I mean, you start with a small GSL and in the end you end up with a full language. So I started to take a look at what option I had to not write my own GSL. And well, I decided that I needed for some language, a full language. Maybe not something very heavy because it's still like small window manager. So in 2008, so it's a very long time ago, I started to, well, take a look at what existed back then, and I kind of reduced the list to 3 languages. Python because I already use it, but it's not really designed, neither sold to be embedded. It's possible to do so. There's a few programs doing it, but it's not like it's not on the box like, hey, Python is very cool to be embedded. Lua is. It was used already by a few programs, games, whatever. It was quite popular. Guile, but Guile, I mean, it's scary for most users. When I was talking about Guile on IRC back then, there was like, whoa, there's too many parentheses, guys. We don't understand why there's so many parentheses everywhere. It's crazy. So that's the problem you have with Lisp language in general, which is a pain. But when you have a lot of different users, that's try to pay. But it is designed for being embedded too. At first it was, even if I was kind of, it was weird though to being used in things like Emacs, for example. But that was free that I tried. I tried Python. So Python 2, Python 3. That's hey Victor. So that was a question in 2008, and I think it's still a question today. Like even 8 years later, a lot of people don't know if they should do Python 2, Python 3. So imagine back at the time how confused you was. It's not really like designed to be embedded, so the documentation is very sparse, and at least was very sparse back then. And the C code was a bit obscure to me. There was a lot of talk about reference counting, which I was not familiar with back then. So it looked pretty complicated at the time. So I ditched Python pretty quickly. The upside was Python is a good ecosystem, so I knew that I was like not going to use that, but well, I tried Guile. I mean, I was scared by scheme in general. It was like, whoa, too weird for me. I was doing C. Python, it was like too different for me back at the time. But it was designed for being embedded, and the version in 2007 and 8 was Guile 1, which was like less exciting that Guile 2 is, thanks to Andy, who did a lot of work in Guile 2 from what I heard, and it's like nowadays very much exciting than it was. And the documentation was very scarce. Not necessarily bad or outdated, but it was like not really helpful for a novice user like me. Like I knew nothing about embedding language, so I was like, whoa, how do you do that? But Lua on the other end was like super easy. Like I remember I read of the whole manual in like a day, and a week later I had a proof of concept of awesome doing things with Lua. Like I was able to add title bars just with 2 lines of Lua in my C program. It was very, very easy, very fast. As you all know, it's a small footprint for memory. It was like very easy. There's a lot of documentation. It's really designed to be embedded, like I think a bit like Guile was, but the documentation actually explains you how to embed Lua in a C program with examples, etc. So I think for all of the 3 languages, a good things to remember is that documentation is like super important if you want adaptation to your project, programming language, or whatever. So that was our version 3 of Awesome, which was released with support for Lua, for a programming language. We exposed only a few functions back then. We were not able to do a lot of the things you can do today with Awesome 3.5. It was pretty small. If you compare to what you were able to do compared to like something like DWM with its only 2,000 source line of code, you have like 13 and a bit of Lua, and you could do a lot more things. It grew, and it still works today. There's still a lot of users. I have no clue how many users. I think we have like 1,000 of people on the mailing list now, so probably 10 times more users, so it's pretty cool. The C code has been reduced. That's one of the perks of embedding a language that you can express a lot of the C things actually in Lua or any other language you embed. So you tend to reduce your C code size because, well, it's simpler to write things in Lua. So the more time passes, the more you start to reduce the C code size and push things to your, well, embedded language. So how it went? So the upside of Lua is that it's fast. Even today, there is no, as far as I know, other window manager as fast as Awesome with as many as ability and features that it offers. Really, it's like it only has a few megabytes of memory used, and you can do almost anything. So it's only a window manager. It's not like a full desktop, but for drawing a few title bars or system bars or whatever, and moving window around, it's like most efficient things there is still today. It's very easy to learn Lua. So I was a bit scared that users were like abandoning Awesome because the transition from a flat configuration file to language is like not something everybody enjoyed back then. But pretty soon they all started to realize that Lua was super easy to learn. That you are like, I mean, the documentation was good, so all you had to do was to spend a couple of hours reading the book that is online, and well, you will know the basics. And the API we exposed from Awesome in Lua was pretty easy to use, so you would be able to do anything in maybe half a day, write your own window manager, because that's one of the perks of using Lua or any embedding language that you can. Awesome has been designed not as a window manager in version 3, but as a framework to write your own window manager. Because, like I said, once a year I was like everybody. You go to the list of window manager that exist and you try everything. And none of the window manager usually do everything you want. There's always something, features, or something you would like to be different. So my way of solving that was to say, okay, Awesome is not going to be a window manager, it's going to be a framework to write your own window manager with a very small language. And I was very good at that. The learning curve was very, very easy, and the community is pretty good, and was pretty good at the time. I think it's still pretty good today. There was a lot of things we didn't have to do because there were modules to do that. Back then, there were not a lot of Guile modules. I mean, to do anything fancy. We wrote a few modules in Lua, and pretty soon the community catch up on us. We wrote a Pongo binding, which is going to be a library to handle fonts, and Kero one too, to draw things on the screen. We wrote our own bindings, like something kind of quick and dirty. And we ended up ditching it because somebody wrote a full introspective binding to it. So it was pretty cool to be part of a community where, well, you can do things, but the community is doing more than you are doing. So it's pretty cool. One of the downside of Lua is that you actually misses a lot of features that you would like to see, like object systems or a lot of advanced features. So I spend a lot of time writing things like an object system, which is very useful to use when you have a window manager because everything is seen as objects, even to the user. So it's pretty easy to manipulate for end users. And we spend a lot of time writing things around Lua to complete the language. And that's where I stopped working on Awesome because I was spending more time writing a programming language on top of Lua that's Awesome itself. The Lua downside that I found, I already wrote a big blog post a few years ago about that. The stack-based C API is really not something I like because to debug it, you have to use, back then you had to use your own tools. It was not supported by GDB or Valgrind or whatever, so tracking memory leaks on the Lua stack was like a nightmare. There's no paradigm, so there's no objects, ref counting, etc. At least in Lua 5.0, 5.1 we were using. And the community was small, but I think it really grew when we started to use it with Awesome. So it was pretty cool to be in Lua community at that time. We didn't use Guile, but I still see a few upside to Guile that maybe we would have been able to use, which is multiple language support that has come with version 2, I think, which at the time we were at work. I don't know if it works today on Lua. It doesn't, okay, but it was supposed to work at some point. I would have loved personally to use Emacsys because I've did a lot of Emacsys for the past years. Gigs and things like that was pretty cool now that didn't exist back then because well it was the old guy and well it's a Lisp and I really since then I switched my mind and I do prefer and I do like Lisp a lot. I've been doing a lot of Emacs and I think Emacs is kind of one of I think the model I realized I should have probably followed doing Lua earlier. So the few lessons that we learned, I think it's not to embed. Like I said, you'll see code size tends to decrease because you do more in your language. What embedding is a failure is like when you can't write from scratch in the language you want, like Guile, Lua, whatever. You have to write C, so you tend to think your program that way. But it's way better to say, okay, I'm going to do everything in Guile or Lua or whatever, and to write the bindings. Something you really don't want to do because you really want to solve your problem and not everyone else's problems, which is the part of the bindings. When you pick a language, you become part of the community with the good and the bad parts. Luckily for us, the Lua community was pretty good, so it was a good ride. A lot of people ask me if, and still asks if we could change Lua to something else, which is like not even possible nowadays. We have so much lines of code existing. And I absolutely don't regret it, even if I say a lot of bad things. I said a lot of bad things on Lua and what I dislike it, but I think it's pretty good for what we do in Awesome. It has its defects like any other programming language, I guess, but it was really a good thing and nobody really complained with good arguments about Lua itself. So it's really like, I think a good success using Lua in Awesome. Thanks. Any questions, guys?
No questions?
If you have time to want to write a new project like that today, you say that you should not embed a new language. So will it make sense to start it in Python directly?
I think I would pick the language which has the most bindings to the library we use in Awesome, which is like XCB for doing X. But I think, writing a window manager today where you have things like Wayland is like a weird idea. But so yeah, I don't think there's binding for XCB or other library we use like GBus, etc. In Lua, maybe in Lua and Guile there is, but not in every language out there. So it's really the problem you want to solve. Is it like if you have to spend months and weeks first to write your bindings, it's a real problem. So are you really sure you want to do that first? So if it's not, you don't want to do that, you have to pick a language where everything exists already, which can be Python because it has the largest community.
Makes sense.
Okay, time's up.
Thanks.